Hey friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I've got an all dies, no stamps card using Lawn Fawn's terrific tulips and lovely lily of the valley. So I'm going to start by die cutting all of my different elements, and first I'm going to work on the tulips. I'm going to be using some ballet slippers, a lilac, and sticky note cardstock, all from Lawn Fawn, and I will trim that out of each of those shades. And then I'm going to take the lily of the valley and trim that out of some fog cardstock. Next, I'm going to bring in 2 shades of green, just so I have a little bit of variation there. I'm going to use cilantro cardstock for the leaves and stems of the terrific tulips, and I'll use algae cardstock for the leaves and stems of the lily of the valley. Then I'm going to switch to the Flower Bouquet wrap die set, and I am going to trim the bow part out of some guava cardstock. I just wanted to have a little bit of a brighter pop of pink on there with that ribbon. And then I'm going to go to my Bitsy Blooms 6x6 pattern paper pad, and I'm going to go with this green floral. And that is what I'm going to trim my wrap out of. At first I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with the green floral or the green plaid, but I decided to go with the green floral for the wrap. So I'm going to die cut both parts of that out of this one piece of cardstock. Next, I want to add a bit of dimension to all of these little die cuts. So I'm going to bring out all of my little pieces from the Lily of the Valley set first. And I'm just going to lay those out on my blending mat. And I want to add just the tiniest bit of shading to them to just give them an extra little pop of color so they're not this kind of grayish off-white. So I'm going to bring in shaded lilac for that, and I'm only going to add that to the very base of these flowers. And I found that it was easier to just pick those up so that I could add that ink right along the bottom edge and just give it a little bit of something extra. And I think that looks really pretty with the fog cardstock. So I ended up doing quite a few of these. I wasn't sure how many of those Lily of the Valley I was going to need in my bouquet. If you've watched any of my Plan a Card with Me videos, you know I like to lay out all of my stamps when I am designing a card, and then I know how many of each thing I need. But with the dies, it's a little bit trickier to do that. So I just had to kind of guesstimate how much I would need, and when I'm doing something like this where there's a lot of steps, I tend to overestimate, and that way if I have extras, fine, but I'm not short-handed when it comes to assembling the card. I'm also going to use this shaded lilac on the lilac cardstock. I think it looks really beautiful on that pale purple. But I am going to be a lot more heavy-handed on this because I want to set it apart from the Lily of the Valley. So on the center piece, which just has the 2 lines of stitching detail, I just started down at the bottom and blended up. But on the 2 side pieces that have the 3 rows of stitching detail, I came up the outer edge of those. And then I also wanted to do some splatter detail just to add a little bit of extra interest to these. So I'm pressing some of that ink onto an acrylic block, adding a little bit of water to that, mixing it up with a thin paintbrush, and then tapping that all over my petals. And then I'm going to let these dry and clean up my work surface, and we will move on to the pink tulip. And for this one, I'm going to bring in some Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to repeat the same process. For the outer 2, I'm going to add it at the bottom and then kind of up the outer side a little bit. But for the center one, I'm just going to add it like straight up from the bottom. And then I go back and add a little extra ink down at the bottom so that it has almost an ombre effect. And I'm going to splatter some ink on these petals as well, Just repeating that same process for each of these little flowers. I'm using a thin paintbrush so I can get some very fine little spray on there. And the ink wasn't quite loose enough so that it would splatter how I wanted, so I did add a bit of extra water to that. And then again, I'll let these dry and clean up my work surface and then move on to the yellow tulip. And for the yellow, I'm going to bring in mustard seed. And I think that pairs really well with the sticky note, and it gave it a really nice vibrancy that I was hoping for. That sticky note is such a pale shade that if you don't add something to it, it can kind of get lost in the mix with the other colors that I've got going on. So I was glad that the mustard seed just really made it a little bit bolder, but we still have those pale tips that are going to help it tie into the other pastel shades. So I'm going to do my splatter detail on this final tulip. And then I'm going to move on to the bow. And for the bow, I'm going to bring in some worn lipstick. And the worn lipstick is actually a little bit lighter than the guava, so it gave it almost like a little highlight shine in the center there. I just added it to the center of the bow and the ends of the ribbons, and then the little knot that is going to be layered over top of the bow. I am not going to do any more splatter for the rest of the elements. I just wanted that on the tulips to help them stand out a bit, make them the center star of the show. But I'm going to move on to my greenery next, and for that I'm going to bring in Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink. I'm layering this over the cilantro pieces, and I decided to put my shadow on the outside edge. So the opposite side of where that stitching detail is. The stitching detail is not in the center, it's a little bit shifted to one side. So I am placing my ink on the opposite side and just making sure that I carry that up the outer edge until that's nice and vibrant. I didn't go quite all the way up the first one, so once I saw how I liked it better on the second one, I just went back and fixed the first one so that it would be the same. Again, I did a few extra leaves. I didn't know if I was going to need them or not, but I just wanted to have them in case. And then I know that I'm going to need 3 stems for my 3 tulips. So I'm just running that down the bottom half of the stem and then adding a little extra down at the bottom third. I'm going to bring in my algae pieces next, and I'm going to use the same Distress Oxide ink, but this time I'm being a little bit more heavy-handed with that. And for these, I actually put my shading on the side that had the stitching detail on the outer edge. I think you can do it either way. It looks nice both ways. And then for the stems, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the other stems, inking about half of it and then a little extra down at the very bottom. And you do have to be a little bit careful with these. I was not being careful and they kind of got bent. So now that all my inking is done, I can build my tulips. I'm going to take the 3 pieces of my pink tulip first, and I'll run some liquid glue up the left and right side of that, and then layer the side pieces right over top. I'll hold them together with my fingers and make any last adjustments because this glue does dry very quickly, so I want that to be exactly how I want it before I set that down and move on to the next one. So for the yellow tulip, I'm going to assemble it the same way, just adding my glue up the sides. And then you can decide how far out you want those side petals to go, if you want to make it look like it's more open or more closed. You can also reverse how you assemble it, like I'm going to do with this purple one. I'm actually going to put the side petals underneath the center petal. And I really like how that looks too. I think they all look nice. It's just kind of from different angles of your tulip. Then I'm going to grab the greenery pieces and I'll add some liquid glue to the top and just set one of the tulips in place over top so that they are attached to the stems. And then once I have my tulips assembled, I'll set those aside and work on my lily of the valley. I'm just going to dot the liquid glue onto the 5 little ends on the stems, and then I'll just choose a flower to add right over top. Makes it really quick and easy to assemble, and I can even kind of turn and adjust those so that they're facing how I want them. And I'm just going to do one of these for now because I'm not sure how many I'm going to need. Then I'm going to work on my sentiment, and I'm going to use another piece of fog cardstock for that. I'm taking a sentiment from the Magic Heart Messages that says, "Love you lots." I really love the font of this one, and I'm going to stamp that down in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'll stamp that twice to make sure it's nice and legible, and then set that aside to dry. I'll pop my card base in my MISTI, which is made out of more lilac cardstock, and I'm stamping in Juice Box ink, and I'm stamping Happy Mother's Day plus a tiny little solid butterfly, which I will also stamp 2 more times just to kind of fill in that inside, and that is from the Mom Plus Me stamp set. I'm going to go back to my Bitsy Blooms 6x6 pad and tear out the coordinating print with this green diagonal plaid, and I'll trim that down with the largest of the large stitch rectangle stackables. And now I'm ready to start assembling, so I'm going to glue this pattern paper to cover the entire card front. It is a standard A2 size card, so 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. Then I'll bring in the 2 pieces of my flower bouquet wrap, and I'm going to glue the front piece to the back piece. And then there's still a little slit behind that I can slide all of my flowers into. So I'm just going to start arranging this little bouquet. This is kind of fun for me because years ago I used to be a floral designer. I used to design floral bouquets for a living at a craft store. So I was working with silk flowers, not real flowers. But I always thought that being a florist would be such a fun job. And I really thought about pursuing that at one time. But now I get to do it in paper on today's card. So I'm just arranging those tulips and kind of fiddling around with them to make sure I have them where I want them. And then I'm also going to add in some of my leaves. And once I can see that I like the way it's looking, I'm going to very carefully pick some of these items up and start gluing them down into place. I do want to be careful not to glue too much, so I'm only adding like a small amount of glue behind them because I still want to slide in some other elements, some extra leaves, and that lily of the valley. So I need to be able to adjust a little bit, so that's why I only added just a very small little circle of glue behind each of those flowers. For these leaves that I know are going to stay where I'm putting them in the back, I can add a bit more glue. But I think the whole thing will be very secure. This glue is extremely strong. So I'm going to tuck that lily of the valley down in front and have that kind of overlapping the yellow and purple tulip. And I'll go ahead and glue down the buds that are on the left side. For the ones on the right side, I could see that I wanted to add another leaf first to cover up some of those stems. They were just looking a little bit messy, all kind of jumbled back there. So adding that leaf to cover them up, I think made it look a little bit more polished. And then I could glue those other buds down. I thought about adding in some additional leaves, but really didn't like the way they were looking. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll tear off a little piece of paper tape and hold the stems in place and trim off the excess so that we don't see them from the front of the bouquet. And then I can attach my little ribbon over top. I'm just going to put the ribbon ends on first. Then I'll add the bow, and then we've got that little center piece of the knot, so I'll just add a touch of glue right over top of that. Got a little bit off center there, and then I got a little bit too much glue, but I just wiped that off with my fingers and then press that down into place. Then I can decide how I want this on the card. I decided to tip it at a little bit of an angle, and so it's coming from the bottom left corner toward the top right corner. So I'll add some more liquid glue to the back of that. It has quite a bit of dimension just from all the different layers of cardstock and pattern paper, so I didn't feel the need for any foam tape. I trimmed down my sentiment with the middle size of the Everyday Sentiment banners. I'm going to add some liquid glue to that and then have that coming in from the lower right hand side. I'll glue that down and then trim off the excess. And then I did want to add a few sequins to this card just to have a bit of sparkle on it. So I'm going to dot some liquid glue in a few little places, and then I will pick up some sequins with my jewel picker and just set those down into the liquid glue. And I have two different sizes that I'm using. I have a smaller one and then a medium size. And I added one last sequin, and then I'm going to grab some Stardust Stickles and fill the centers of the sequins in so that we have a little extra sparkle. And that is going to complete this card. So I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll lift that up so you can see all of the detail and give you another peek at the inside. I used this one for my Mother's Day card this year, but I think it could work for so many different occasions. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. All the products I used will be listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in the next. Bye-bye!